Welcome to another incredible journey, my amazing friends. Today, we have something truly special for you. A story that will inspire, empower, and change the way you think about language, storytelling, and history. Whether you're here to improve your English, learn something new, or simply be inspired, you're in the right place. In this video, we're diving into the life of one of the greatest minds the world has ever known, William Shakespeare. His words have shaped literature, influenced millions, and continue to live on even after centuries. But how did a small-town boy from Stratford become the most famous writer in history? And what lessons can we learn from his journey? Now, let's begin. He was not born into a wealthy or noble family. He never attended a grand university. Yet, he became the most recognized name in literature. So, if you are learning English today, if you struggle with words, if you wonder how to express yourself, this story is for you. Because Shakespeare, the greatest playwright of all time, started as an ordinary boy, just like anyone else. This is a story of struggle, passion, and unstoppable creativity. So sit back, listen carefully, and enjoy. This will not only improve your English listening skills, but also fill you with inspiration. It was a chilly April day in 1564 in a small English town called Stratford upon Avon. A baby boy was born. His parents, John and Mary Shakespeare, held him close, never imagining that their son would one day change the world. His name was William Shakespeare. Stratford upon Avon was not a large city. It was a quiet town with narrow streets, wooden houses, and a gently flowing river. People lived simple lives, working as farmers, traders, and craftsmen. William's father, John Shakespeare, was a glove maker. He crafted fine leather gloves and sold them in the town market. He was a hard-working man, well respected in the community. His mother, Mary Arden, came from a wealthy farming family. She was kind, strong, and devoted to her children. William was the third of 8 children. Their home was always filled with laughter, conversation, and the sounds of daily life. But William was different. He was observant, always listening to how people spoke, how they laughed, and how they cried. He didn't realize it yet, but this curiosity would one day turn him into the greatest playwright the world had ever known. In those days, there were no televisions, no phones, and no internet. People entertained themselves with stories. Traveling actors would visit the town, performing plays in the streets. Young William would watch in amazement, his eyes filled with excitement. He loved listening to old legends, folk tales, and heroic stories from history. Each story fed his imagination and made him dream bigger. At the age of 7, William started school. It was a small, simple building with wooden benches and a strict teacher. But what he learned there would shape his destiny. He studied Latin, history, poetry, and literature. Latin was the language of scholars, and young William quickly became skilled at reading it. He discovered great writers from ancient Rome and Greece, like Plutarch and Virgil. Their words stayed with him, and later inspired many of his plays. But William was not just a bookworm. He loved nature, often walking through green fields, watching the river, and listening to birds. He played with friends, ran through the streets, and enjoyed life like any other boy. Yet deep inside, he had a hunger for words, for stories, and for meaning. Just when life seemed normal, trouble struck. William's father, once a successful businessman, started facing financial problems. He had borrowed money for his business, but things were not going well. This meant the family had less money. It was, a difficult time. There were even days when they struggled to afford food. William saw the stress in his father's eyes and the worry in his mother's voice. He understood that life was uncertain, but instead of losing hope, he observed everything. He felt every emotion deeply. He learned that life was full of ups and downs, something he would later write about in his plays. Even as a child, William had a special way with words. He would make up little poems and rhymes. He loved to act, play roles, and entertain his friends with stories. But no one in Stratford-upon-Avon knew that this young boy would one day write the most famous plays in the world. For now, he was just William, the boy with big dreams. But those dreams were about to take him far, very far. William Shakespeare was growing up fast. By the time he turned 14, he had already read many books, listened to hundreds of stories, and watched traveling actors perform in his small town. But life was not easy. His father's financial troubles worsened. The once respected businessman now struggled to pay his debts. The family, which had once lived in comfort, now faced hardship. Young William saw it all. He realized how quickly life could change. He understood that nothing in life was permanent, not money, not status, not even happiness. But instead of feeling hopeless, he became more observant, thoughtful, and creative. Then, something happened that changed his life forever. By the time William turned 18, he was no longer a boy. He was a young man, and like many young men, he fell in love. Her name was Anne Hathaway. She was beautiful, intelligent, and independent. But there was something unusual about their love story. Anne was 26 years old, 8 years older than William. In those times, it was rare for a younger man to marry an older woman. But love does not follow rules, and William was deeply in love with Anne. However, something unexpected happened. Anne Hathaway became pregnant before they were married. In those days, society was very strict about such matters. A child born outside of marriage would bring shame to both families. So, William and Anne had to get married quickly. In November 1582, at just 18 years old, William Shakespeare married Anne Hathaway. He was still a young man trying to find his way in life, and now he was about to become a father. 6 months after the wedding, Anne gave birth to their first child, a baby girl named Susanna. 2 years later, in 1585, Anne gave birth to twins, a boy named Hamnet and a girl named Judith. At just 21 years old, William Shakespeare was a husband and the father of 3 children. Life was moving fast. But there was one big problem. How would he support his family? His father's business was still struggling, and William had no stable job. He understood that he needed to earn a living, but how? He had no desire to follow in his father's footsteps as a glove maker. He had no land, no noble title, and no wealth. But he had something else: words, stories, and a burning passion to create. From 1585 to 1592, there is a mysterious gap in Shakespeare's life, a period historians call the lost years, because there are no records of his activities. No one knows exactly what he did during these 7 years, or how he survived. However, there are several theories. Some believe he became a school teacher, since he was well educated and may have worked as a private tutor for a wealthy family. Others think he joined a traveling theater company, where he learned the art of acting and stage performance. Another theory suggests that he got into legal trouble and had to flee Stratford. According to one story, he was caught hunting illegally on a rich man's land and had to escape. Whatever the real story may be, one thing is certain. When Shakespeare reappeared in history in 1592, he was no longer just a small town boy. He had arrived in London, ready to take on the world. London in the late 1500s was a city full of excitement, ambition, and opportunity. It was the center of England's theatre world, filled with actors, writers, and poets, all competing for fame. Shakespeare arrived with no money, no influential connections, and no formal experience. But he had something more powerful: natural talent, relentless determination, and an unstoppable passion for storytelling. He started as an actor in small theatre groups, carefully studying everything: the way people spoke, how they moved, how they expressed emotions. Soon, he began writing his own plays. At first, his works were simple, light-hearted performances meant to entertain and amuse audiences. But as he grew as a writer, he realized he could do more. He could write plays that made people think, feel, and question life itself. By 1592, Shakespeare's name was becoming well known in London's theatre scene, but not everyone welcomed his success. A well-established playwright named Robert Greene publicly mocked him in a letter, calling him an upstart crow, implying that he was just a nobody pretending to be a great writer. But Shakespeare did not let the insult affect him. Instead of backing down, he worked even harder. He wrote more plays, performed in more theatres, and gained the admiration of actors and audiences alike. Then, in 1593, disaster struck. A deadly disease, known as the plague, spread across London. Theatres were forced to shut down, and suddenly, Shakespeare found himself without work. But he did not give up. Instead of writing plays, he turned to poetry. He wrote 2 long narrative poems, Venus and Adonis, and The Rape of Lucrece. These works brought him both wealth and fame. Even Queen Elizabeth I was impressed by his writing. By 1594, the plague had lessened. Theatres reopened, and Shakespeare was able to return to doing what he loved most: writing and performing plays. From that point on, he became a key member of a famous acting company called the Lord Chamberlain's Men. Shakespeare was no longer just a writer, he was also a performer. His plays explored deep human emotions. Romeo and Juliet captured love and heartbreak. Macbeth examined power and ambition. Hamlet explored betrayal and revenge. And Othello delved into jealousy and madness. By the late 1590s, Shakespeare had become one of the most famous playwrights in England, but he was not satisfied. He wanted more success, more influence, and more masterpieces that would stand the test of time, and that was exactly what he achieved. In 1599, something extraordinary happened. Shakespeare and his acting company embarked on a grand project that would change theatre forever: the creation of the Globe Theatre. The Lord Chamberlain's Men decided to establish their own theatre, and they named it the Globe Theatre. Imagine a grand circular structure with an open roof, where thousands of excited spectators rushed to find a seat. The stage was set for some of the greatest plays ever written. This was Shakespeare's home, his dream, his kingdom. At the Globe, he staged his most remarkable works: Hamlet, a story of revenge, madness, and fate; Macbeth, a tale of ambition, power, and guilt; Othello, a tragic account of love and jealousy; Julius Caesar, a political drama filled with betrayal. These plays were not just for entertainment. They were profound reflections on human nature that made audiences think, feel, and question life itself. Before long, Shakespeare's success brought him immense wealth. By the early 1600s, he was not only a famous writer, but also one of the richest playwrights in England. As part owner of the Globe, he received a substantial income every time a play was performed. He also earned money from his published plays and poems, which were sold across England. His talent gained him royal favor, as both the king and queen admired his work. With his growing fortune, he purchased multiple properties, including a grand estate in Stratford known as New Place. At a time when most playwrights struggled to make a living, Shakespeare was enjoying both wealth and comfort. However, fame and fortune were not enough for him. He wanted something greater. In 1603, a historic event changed everything. Queen Elizabeth I, Shakespeare's greatest supporter, passed away. Her successor, King James I, took the throne. At first, there was uncertainty. Would the new king embrace theatre, or would he shut down the playhouses? But Shakespeare had nothing to fear. King James admired his work so much that he personally invited Shakespeare's acting company to perform for him. Then, something extraordinary happened. King James granted Shakespeare's company a royal title, renaming them the King's Men. This was the highest honor a playwright could receive. It meant they were now the official actors of the royal court, protected and supported by the king himself. They would perform for the most powerful figures in England. Shakespeare had gone from being the son of a simple glovemaker to becoming the most celebrated playwright in the nation's history. Between 1603 and 1611, Shakespeare wrote some of his most famous and deeply moving plays. These works were not just stories. They were reflections of life, power, love, and loss. King Lear told a heartbreaking tale of a father's betrayal. Macbeth explored the dark consequences of unchecked ambition, and The Tempest wove a magical story of forgiveness and new beginnings. As he grew older, his writing became more emotional, more philosophical. He had experienced fame, wealth, betrayal, and sorrow, and these experiences shaped his plays. His characters felt more real than ever before. By 1611, Shakespeare had accomplished everything he had ever dreamed of. He was famous, wealthy, and respected by kings. His name was legendary. In 1613, he made a decision that surprised many. He retired. For years, he had lived in London, writing, acting, and directing plays. But deep inside, he longed for home. He missed the quiet streets of Stratford, the rolling green fields, the peaceful rivers. Most of all, he missed his family. Packing up his life in the bustling city, he returned to New Place, his grand home in Stratford, where he planned to spend the rest of his days in peace. His daily life became simpler. He would rise early in the morning, strolling through his gardens, appreciating the beauty of nature. He would sit by the fireplace, reading books, reflecting on the life he had lived. He spent time with his daughters, Susanna and Judith, discussing life, love, and the future. Occasionally, visitors from London would travel to see him, seeking his wisdom on plays and poetry. Even in retirement, his mind remained full of stories. People say that in his final years, he would often sit for hours, lost in thought, whispering lines of poetry to himself. In 1616, something unexpected happened. One evening, Shakespeare attended a dinner party with friends. The night was filled with laughter, wine, and conversation. But soon after, he fell ill. Some say it was a fever. Others believe it was a sickness brought on by the cold weather. No one knows for certain. Within days, his condition worsened. His family and friends gathered around him, knowing that the greatest writer in history was about to leave this world. On April 23, 1616, at the age of 52, William Shakespeare took his final breath. The world had lost a genius, but his words would live on forever. Before his death, Shakespeare wrote a few lines that would serve as his final message to the world. Aware that future generations might attempt to move his body from his resting place, he composed an epitaph, a short poem inscribed on his grave, "Good friend, for Jesus' sake forbear to dig the dust enclosed here. Blessed be the man that spares these stones, and cursed be he that moves my bones." Even in death, his words carried power and immortality. When news of his passing spread, Stratford fell silent. People gathered at Holy Trinity Church, the very place where he had been baptized as a baby, to say their final goodbyes. The church was filled with mourners, actors, writers, family, friends, and ordinary townspeople who had known him since childhood. Tears were shed, prayers were whispered, and his body was laid to rest in the town where he had begun his journey. There were no grand monuments, no golden tombs, just a simple grave, marked with his own words. Yet little did the world know that this was only the beginning of his legacy. Shakespeare's body may have been buried, but his words refused to die. His plays continued to be performed, his books continued to be read, and his name continued to be spoken. Years passed, then decades, then centuries. Still, Shakespeare remained alive in the hearts of people across the globe. His works were translated into every language. His stories inspired millions of writers, filmmakers, and poets. His words became a natural part of everyday speech, with phrases like "to be" or "not to be." William Shakespeare, the boy from Stratford, had become eternal. When Shakespeare passed away, the town of Stratford fell into silence. People gathered at Holy Trinity Church, the very place where he had been baptized as a baby, to bid him a final farewell. The church was filled with mourners, actors, writers, family members, friends, and the simple townsfolk who had known him since childhood. Tears were shed, prayers were whispered, and his body was laid to rest in the town where his journey had begun. There were no grand monuments, no golden tombs, just a simple grave, marked by his own words. But what no one realized at the time was that this was only the beginning of his legacy. Shakespeare's body may have been buried, but his words refused to fade. His plays continued to be performed, his books continued to be read, and his name continued to be spoken. Years turned into decades, and decades into centuries. Yet Shakespeare remained alive in the hearts of people across the world. His works were translated into every language, inspiring millions of writers, filmmakers, and poets. His words became an essential part of everyday speech, with phrases like "to be" or "not to be." Though the man himself was gone, his influence would live on forever. The world is like a stage, and every one of us has a role to play. A rose by any other name would smell as sweet. These words, like many others, remind us that language has power, the power to inspire, to heal, and to transform the world. Even after more than 400 years, Shakespeare's influence is everywhere. His plays continue to be performed in theaters across the globe. His books are studied in schools and universities. His words appear in movies, songs, and speeches. Why? Because Shakespeare understood human nature like no one else. He wrote about love, betrayal, ambition, jealousy, fate, and dreams, universal emotions that connect all of us. He showed that love can be both beautiful and tragic in Romeo and Juliet. He revealed how power can corrupt even the strongest hearts in Macbeth. He warned us that betrayal can come from those closest to us in Julius Caesar. And in Hamlet, he captured the mystery and uncertainty of life itself. His stories are timeless because they remind us of who we are and who we have the potential to become. If Shakespeare were alive today, he would have one message for you. Dream big. Tell your story. Never stop believing in yourself. He was just a small town boy from Stratford, with no wealthy family, no special connections, and no guarantee of success. But he had one thing, a dream, and that dream changed the world. And that, my amazing friends, is the story of William Shakespeare, a man whose words changed the world forever. But now, it's your turn. What is your dream? Do you want to be a writer, a creator, a speaker, or someone who leaves a mark on this world? Remember, Shakespeare started with nothing but a dream, and so can you. If this story inspired you even a little, hit the like button so I know you felt the power of this message. Comment below and share your dreams with us. Let's inspire each other. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell icon because we are on this journey together, learning, growing, and becoming unstoppable. Your future is waiting. Go and make history. See you in the next video. Stay inspired. Stay unstoppable.